Good morning everybody, lovely to be back. Looking forward to telling you another story this morning. And I'm going to tell you a story that I told my class yesterday. And I thought it might be nice to share it with all of you this morning. And it's a story not from my story box, but a story that happened to me some years ago now when I was living in England. But at the time I was actually in a country called Ireland, which I was cycling around. And this is an adventure that happened to me during that trip. And it starts on the west coast of Ireland, which is a very quiet, beautiful part of Ireland with high cliffs and crashing waves and small villages and towns. And on the edge of one of these towns lived a little boy called Bill, and Bill lived with his father. And Bill's father worked in the local town. Excuse me. And Bill went to school in the local town too, and one of the best things that he enjoyed doing was watching for rainbows, because in Ireland it rains a lot and the weather is always changing. I found that out when I was cycling. One minute it could be raining really hard, the next minute the sun would be out, the next minute there might be a hailstorm, you might even get caught in snow. So whenever it was raining and the sun came out, of course you get rainbows, and there are lots of rainbows in Ireland. And Bill, this little boy, he would have been about 7 at the time, he loved looking for rainbows. And when it was raining and he thought that the sun might be coming out, he would sit on his windowsill looking out the window waiting for rainbows to appear. And you would get the most beautiful rainbows in Ireland. I saw quite a few of them when I was cycling around, and they would often last for some time. And one of the things that Bill enjoyed doing the most when a rainbow appeared in the sky was to get on his bike and with his dad had a bike too, and they would try and cycle to the end of the rainbow. And it was a little adventure for Bill. They would get their bikes out to the shed and they would pedal off in the direction of the rainbow, and they would hopefully get to the end of the rainbow before it disappeared. Now sometimes they had quite a long way to ride. Sometimes they would have to leave their bikes and maybe cross into a field or go through a small wood or a forest to get to the end of the rainbow. And then whenever they got to the end of the rainbow and they were there when the rainbow was still on the ground, Bill would look around in the grass and find chocolate golden coins. And he was always super excited. He would pick up these chocolate golden coins and put them in his pocket. Sometimes his dad would let him eat a couple of them, and he would take the rest home and put them in a box under his bed. And it was one of the things that he loved doing the most with his dad. So whenever there was a rainbow, of course, he couldn't wait to get outside. And his dad would tell him that the little chocolate coins came from the leprechauns that lived in Ireland, that left them at the end of rainbows. Now one day, Bill came home from school and his dad was home, and he was sitting at the kitchen table looking quite sad. And Bill said, "Dad, what's up?" And Bill explained to the family that unfortunately he'd lost his job in the town and he wasn't able to find anything else. And from that time on, Bill's father became quite sad. He couldn't find a job anywhere. He would go out every day looking for a new job. He would go to other towns close by, but he wasn't able to find anything. And over a period of a week, 2 weeks, a month, when he still hadn't found anything, Bill's dad became very sad, and he would often spend time sitting inside. They also had started having trouble with money because, of course, his father wasn't working. So although they had a lovely big vegetable garden, it's very easy to grow things in Ireland because it's raining all the time and the soil's so good. But they didn't have enough money for lots of small things. And Bill felt really sorry for his dad and really hoped that he'd find a new job soon. And Bill would try and cheer his father up every time he saw a rainbow. And he would really want his dad to come out with him and chase to the end of the rainbow to find the golden coins. But Bill's father was a little bit reluctant to go out. He wanted to stay at home, and I think in truth he was a little bit too sad to go out chasing rainbows. So one day, when there was a beautiful rainbow in the sky, Bill asked him whether he could go by himself. And his father said, "Well, sure, but be careful, don't go too far." So Bill took his bike out of the shed and he sped off towards the end of the rainbow. And this was a particularly beautiful rainbow. But it took him quite a lot longer to get to the end of it than he'd thought. And he kept on thinking about what his father had said about not going too far. He actually ended up leaving his bike by a fence post and crawling underneath some barbed wire. He had to go across a field and through a small wood until eventually he found himself at the end of the rainbow. And he started looking in the grass for the chocolate coins, and he didn't find any. And then when he looked around, there, sitting on a small tree stump, was a little leprechaun. And the little leprechaun was laughing at him. And Bill looked at the little leprechaun and he remembered what his dad had told him about leprechauns, that you had to be a little bit careful with them because they could be quite bad-tempered and you didn't want to annoy a leprechaun. So very politely Bill asked him why he was laughing. And the leprechaun said to him, "I suppose you're looking for chocolate coins." And Bill said, "Well, that's right. I always find them at the end of the rainbow." And the leprechaun started laughing even harder. And he said to Bill, "Bill, you do know that it's your dad that leaves the chocolate coins. There aren't chocolate coins at the end of a rainbow. When you're turning around looking for them in the long grass, your dad takes them out of his pocket and he drops them in the grass for you to find. Didn't you ever realize that?" And he started laughing again. And Bill thought about it for a moment and realized that the leprechaun must be telling the truth, and he felt quite sad. The leprechaun looked up at Bill and said to him, "I've been waiting for you for some time now. Do you know what leprechauns love most in this world? Chocolate coins. And I've been waiting for you and your dad to come to the end of the rainbow so that I can take some. Because you always forget some, there are always some left in the grass, and I pick them up and I eat them. So I've been waiting for you guys to come back so that I could have some chocolate, because I love chocolate probably more than any other leprechaun." "So here's the thing," said the leprechaun. "Your dad doesn't seem to be coming out much anymore, so here's what I'm going to do for you. If you bring me one of your chocolate coins next time from your treasure box, I will give you 5 real gold coins. And to show you that I'm telling the truth, I will give you a gold coin right now." And out of his pocket he pulled a real gold coin and he gave it to Bill. Now Bill looked at it and didn't really think much about it. It was a big gold coin that felt quite heavy when he put it in his pocket. But he promised the leprechaun that next time that he was at the end of a rainbow, he would bring him one of his chocolate coins. And he left. He went back to his bike and he cycled home. But he didn't tell his dad about the leprechaun. He put the gold coin in his treasure box under the bed. Now, you might be asking yourself, how did the leprechaun know about the treasure box? I have no answer for that. I don't know. But leprechauns are often thought to be quite magical. So now Bill has a real gold coin in his treasure box. And he doesn't tell his father about it. And the next time there's a rainbow, he goes out again. And this time he puts a chocolate coin in his pocket for the leprechaun. And when he gets to the end of the rainbow, there is the leprechaun waiting for him. "Do you have my chocolate coin?" said the leprechaun. And Bill pulls the chocolate coin out of his pocket, and the leprechaun's eyes grow wide with excitement because he knows he's going to get some chocolate. And out of his pocket he pulls the 5 gold coins and Bill puts them in his pocket. The leprechaun greedily rips off the tin foil from the chocolate coin and starts eating it. And as he's munching away and Bill turns around to leave, the leprechaun says to him, "Oh, something I forgot to tell you last time. You are not to tell anybody about the gold coins. Nobody at all. Not your father, not your school friends. Otherwise, something terrible is going to happen to you." And Bill looked at him and said, "What do you mean terrible?" And he said, "Well, if you tell anybody about the gold coins, you yourself will turn into a leprechaun." And Bill looked quite frightened at the leprechaun, and the leprechaun laughed and jumped off the tree stump and ran away back into the woods with a half-eaten piece of chocolate in his hand. So Bill went home with 5 gold coins. He now had 6 gold coins, and he put them in his treasure box. And the next time there was a rainbow, he took another one of the chocolate coins out of his box, and again he went to the end of the rainbow. And sure enough, the leprechaun was waiting for him, greedily expecting another chocolate coin. Bill exchanged his chocolate coin for another 5 gold coins, and he took them home, all the while remembering that he had to keep the secret that the leprechaun had told him not to tell anybody about what was happening. Now this went on for quite some time, and Bill's treasure box became quite full of gold coins. And one day, it was a weekend, he was sitting at the table having breakfast, and his father looked particularly sad this day. He still hadn't been able to find work. And there was a leak in the roof, and the water was coming down, and they had a huge bucket that was in the middle of the kitchen table. And the water was also leaking in other parts of the house too. And his father was particularly upset about not being able to find work, and was even talking about having to move to another part of Ireland to look for more work. And of course Bill didn't want to leave. He loved the house, and he loved his adventures outside, and he loved his school, and he thought about it, and he thought about all the gold coins that were in his treasure box, and he wondered how valuable they were, and he made up his mind. He went into his bedroom, opened up his treasure box, and took out one of the gold coins, and he put it on the table in front of his father. And his father looked at it, and it shone brightly, and he picked it up, and he looked at how thick the gold coin was and how heavy it was, and he put it from one hand to the other. And then he looked at Bill and said to Bill, "Where did you get this coin?" And Bill said, "Well, you mustn't tell anybody because I'm not supposed to, but the leprechauns leave them for me in exchange for chocolate coins." And Bill's father started laughing, and he said, "Bill, I left you the chocolate coins in the grass, but there are no such thing as leprechauns. Where did you get this gold coin?" And Bill tried to explain that he'd met a leprechaun at the end of the rainbow. But Bill's father laughed again and said, "Bill, leprechauns aren't real. Where did you get the coin?" And Bill had no answer for him because, of course, he was telling the truth. But in the end, his father looked at the coin and said, "I need to take this into town to see how much it's worth." And so that afternoon, Bill's father took the gold coin into town, and he went to the bank. And he met the bank manager, and he put the gold coin in front of the bank manager, and the bank manager's eyes grew big when he looked at this gold coin. And he got out his microscope, and he looked through his microscope, and he checked it. And then he looked at it again, and he weighed it. And he looked at Bill's father, and he said, "This coin is worth about $100,000, which was an awful lot of money. Now, of course, it wasn't dollars, because, of course, we have dollars in Canada, but it was worth about what $100,000 would be worth. And with that, Bill's father gave the bank manager the coin, and $100,000 was put into his bank account. And he couldn't believe his luck. Immediately he got the house repaired. He wasn't only able to get the roof repaired, but they were also able to get a new kitchen and bathroom. They were able to afford new clothes for everybody in their family and a few other things. And Bill didn't really think too much about it. His father, of course, was very happy. Not much more was said about this, but after Bill had given his father one gold coin, more gold coins started coming out because Bill started giving his family more money. And it wasn't long before they'd left the little house and they'd moved into a bigger house. And they had everything that they needed. Bill's father managed to get a job quite quickly in the new town where they were living, and Bill had everything that he wanted. Now, fast forward quite a few years when Bill grew up. He'd been spending this money all along, and he'd stopped going to the end of rainbows looking for leprechauns. He had enough money in his treasure box. When he was older and he grew up, he bought himself a beautiful new house with a swimming pool and a tennis court and everything that he wanted. And he didn't even have to work because he didn't need to. All he had to do was take another one of his gold coins out of his treasure box and take it to the bank. Now, very slowly, the money started running out. And Bill wasn't too worried about this because he lived in a beautiful house. He had everything he could ever want. And one day he got up and he went into the bathroom and he looked at his face in the mirror. And he realized that something was different. And he couldn't quite figure out what he was. And then he realized that his face seemed a little bit lower in the mirror. And he went back to have his breakfast and sat down, and he put his feet on the ground, but he realized that when he did try and put his feet on the ground, he was actually only able to put his toes on the ground, not put his feet flat on the floor. And then he started thinking about what the leprechaun had told him. He hadn't thought about it for many years because he just didn't believe it, that eventually he would start shrinking and himself turn into a leprechaun. Immediately he got very worried, and the next day he went to the doctors. And the doctor looked at him and said, "You're in great health, but it's true, you do look a little bit smaller. Let's measure you." And sure enough, Bill had shrunk. Now, after that, he started shrinking a little bit every day, and it wasn't long before he was a very small little person. If you met him walking down the street, you would probably look at him and say, "Yeah, that guy's pretty small." Bill had actually been a very tall man, but now he was quite a short man. And this is where I come into the story, because Bill became quite sad, and he would sit in a cafe in the local town drinking coffee in the corner. And I came into that cafe because it was raining outside and I was on my bike. And I came in and there was nowhere for me to sit apart from near Bill. And I asked him whether he would mind if I sat down next to him. And he was quite happy to have some company. I remember it being pretty dark in the little corner where we were sitting, and I couldn't see Bill very clearly because he was sitting opposite me and he was in the shadows. And we were both drinking a cup of coffee. And he clearly wanted to talk to me. And we got on really well. I told him about my adventures in Ireland and cycling around the country. And he told me about his beautiful house on the hill. And then he looked at me rather strangely and he said to me, "Would you mind if I told you a story? I've not told anybody this at all, not even my family, but I really need to share it with somebody." And he told me the story that I'm telling you now. Now, when he finished his story, my immediate reaction was, that cannot be true. I told Bill, I don't believe in leprechauns. They're not real. People talk about them in Ireland. And I know it rains all the time and there are rainbows, but I don't believe there are leprechauns at the end of rainbows. And I laughed. And Bill looked at me and he said, well, it's true. And with that, he finished his coffee and he stood up. And when he stood up, I had to kind of take a little kind of step back in my seat, push myself back in my seat when I saw how small Bill was. Because when he was sitting down, I didn't realise how short he was. And as he left the cafe, he asked me whether I'd like to visit him sometime. And I said, well, I'm actually doing a little bit of a loop around the town, so I'll be back this way in about a week's time. And Bill laughed and said, well, maybe I won't be here then, but you're welcome to come up to my house. And with that, he left. Now, I still didn't believe in his story, but it did seem rather strange that he was telling me that he was shrinking, and here in front of me was a very small little person. But I didn't think too much more about it. The sun was shining outside, I got back on my bike, and I rode to the next town. But I couldn't stop thinking about Bill. And after about 2 weeks, I ended up back in his hometown, and I went to the cafe. And I was hoping to see Bill there, but he wasn't there. So I went to the owner of the cafe and asked him about the little man that sat in the corner. And the cafe owner knew Bill straight away, and he said he lives in that huge house on top of the hill. I'm sure he wouldn't mind you visiting him. He seems a little bit sad lately. So I got on my bike and I cycled to the top of the hill. And when I got to the top of the hill, I knocked on the door, but there was no answer, and the door was open. So I went into his house calling his name, but there was no answer. And I was just about to turn around and leave when I saw a note on the mantelpiece in front of the fire. And the note was addressed to me. It had my name on it. And I took the note down and I took out a piece of paper, and the note was written to me. And it really just said that he was really happy to have met me, and he thought that it had been really kind that I'd listened to his story, and that he was now a leprechaun. He was too small to live in his house, and he'd gone to join the other leprechauns. And very slowly I started thinking about this story and what he told me. And when I looked down at the bottom of the envelope, he'd left me his last gold coin. I looked at the gold coin really carefully. It was extremely heavy. It was really thick. And I thought about everything that Bill had told me, and I put the gold coin in my pocket and I left the house. Now, I did actually go to the bank and ask about the gold coin. I wasn't told how much it was worth, but I was told it was worth a lot of money. And then again, I thought about the story, and I thought about what had happened to Bill, about breaking his promise to the leprechaun. And then I started wondering what would happen if I spent the gold coin. Would I start turning into a leprechaun? Would I slowly start shrinking? And I became quite worried. So I didn't do anything with the gold coin. I kept the gold coin, but I am definitely not going to spend it. I was even a little bit worried about telling this story to you guys in case there's some kind of leprechaun magic going on. But hopefully I'm going to be okay. But like I say, I'm not touching that gold coin. So that's a true story, something that happened to me some time ago. And I often think about Bill and where he is and what he's doing with the other leprechauns. And I hope that he's happy somewhere. And that's the end of the story this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and looking forward to seeing you again. Stay safe, everybody.